G'day guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Wildcard. Thank you for being here and giving me the pleasure and privilege to entertain you. It is Tuesday and it's time to read the news. So last week there was no huge test matches in rugby. All the Rugby Championship stuff has been kind of teams moving around between countries and had a bit of 1 week off. But the news continues. The dumpster fire New Zealand is finally being put off. Sir Fozzie, after an emergency meeting midweek last week, the New Zealand board had unanimously agreed that Fozzie is the right man to take the All Blacks to the Rugby World Cup next year. This is kind of exactly the same as his contract. I do think that he signed a renewal with the New Zealand Rugby. Ian Foster signed a renewal last year to take the team to 2023 Rugby World Cup. So I think if they terminate him early, they have to pay him out anyway. So just from a financial perspective, it just makes sense for them to keep him. Also, probably another key part of the equation that pushed him over to continue the job is the backing from the players. Pretty much all the players, in fact, I'm pretty sure all the players in the current All Black team started their careers when Foster was assistant coach under Steve Hansen. So a lot of these players, has been, Fozzie has been part of their lives for a very long time now. So yeah, I can see there's a lot of trust between the players and the coaching team. And as a result, that is a pretty important part. If the players can get on with the coaching team, that can create a lot of synergy, a lot of good results, especially when times are tough. It's really important to see that kind of backing by the players around you to give to get that, what do you call it, support behind your own team. So that is really important as well for the success for a team going forward. So based on some of these factors, the board has unanimously agreed to keep Ian Foster as the All Black coach. So I would like to say thank you, South Africa. Maybe we can finally get the Bledisloe back. We have one chance, but we'll talk about that in a few weeks after we lose the Springboks. Anyway, so continuing with this. So obviously everybody has an opinion on Mr. Foster keeping his job. And obviously Michael Cheika has a bit of a morbid kind of view on this issue. He basically thinks that Ian Foster will be loving his current position as head coach, being basically bashed by the media. His argument is basically as a player, you kind of thrive under the pressure. You embrace that pressure of competing on the field. He thinks that that's basically the same mentality for him as a coach, and he thinks that Foster will carry that mentality as well as the All Blacks coach. So he has a quite interesting take on the job as a head coach, and he basically says that the reason he becomes a coach, essentially reflecting on on what's happening with the Fozzie, is the fact that he loves this sort of confrontations. He loves the pressure, and he thinks that Foster will be loving it also in the current circumstances. We know, Michael Cheika was under a lot of pressure in the Wallabies. Maybe he's just reflecting back in the in nostalgia for the days that he was bashed for being the Wallabies coach. Maybe, but I'm sure if you ask Cheika how much he loves his job after losing to England in the quarterfinals, I'm pretty sure he was not happy. Okay, he was pretty salty about the kicking game, but hey, I guess you learn and you grow. That's the main thing here. Obviously, another talking point, the name had to be dropped during that meeting where New Zealand Rugby Robinson and Mark Robinson announced Fozzie keeping his job. He had to drop the other name. The other Robinson, Scott Robinson, the current head coach for the Crusaders, a very successful team, and a lot of people wanted him to take over Fozzie instantaneously, this week essentially. But they had to drop his name. Basically, what's his name, Mark Robinson, the CEO of New Zealand Rugby, basically said that they have huge regards for Scott Robinson, the Crusaders head coach, as a key part of the coaching landscape in the future of New Zealand. And he hopes that, in the future, Scott Robinson will be part of, the New Zealand rugby picture in some ways or form. So he had to kind of like drop his name in there somewhere because there was a lot of probably pressure to replace Ian Foster with Scott Robinson. So yeah, this is a bit of an awkward situation as well. You kind of like telling him that, hey, don't go, because there was some talks about Scott Robinson potentially taking over Eddie Jones' job after 2023. And so New Zealand Rugby is kind of like trying to keep him on the leash a little bit, but not just, not just kind of like tell him that, trying to keep him on the leash a little bit so he doesn't leave for England, I guess. And also big changes for the All Blacks coaching stuff as well. Joe Schmidt has officially joined the assistant coaches for the All Blacks. He was initially retired following his run with Ireland, and then he came out of retirement to become a selector for the All Blacks, and then he started working part-time essentially for the Blues, and then COVID hit the All Blacks team, so he came in as a coach for the first test match against Ireland, which All Blacks dominated, by the way. Everybody seems to forgot the All Blacks actually beat Ireland in the first test, dominated Ireland in the first test. So Joe Schmidt was basically running all the training camp for that one as Fozzie and his team was sick with COVID. So yeah, he's now, Joe Schmidt, an official assistant coach for the All Blacks. And he actually talked about a lot in previous interviews that he wanted to kind of get back on the coaching. He like just watching from the sideline has got that itch back into him again. So he's officially come out of retirement and into a assistant role for the All Blacks. And by the looks of things, that's knowing the way the All Blacks function, he could potentially take over the All Blacks for real in 2023 after the World Cup next year, because that's kind of like how All Blacks work. They have like a assistant coach being promoted to head coach. Steve Hansen was promoted to head coach after Graham Henry, and then Ian Foster was promoted head coach after being assistant to Steve Hansen. So it's potential that Joe Schmidt might take over the All Blacks next year. So we shall wait and see. So this is also another thing about Razor. So if Razor was going to be in line to be the All Blacks coach, I thought they probably would have brought him in as an assistant, but because that's kind of like the tradition of how the All Blacks head coaches are being done. You don't just get handed the team, because there's a lot of like culture adjustment. There's a lot of like, there's a lot of process that the All Blacks has in their own back end. When it comes to selecting the coach, it's kind of like selecting the Pope. You have to, light the fire, signaling, all that sort of stuff. That's the All Blacks head coach is quite a important thing for the Kiwis. So yeah, it's surprising. I feel like Joe Schmidt's more likely to take over than Razor, to be really frank, next year. Also, we talk about the the Silver Lake deal for the All Blacks that was sold. So as part of the deal, basically instead of selling like the official All Blacks, what New Zealand Rugby had to do is they had to create another company that kind of owns the revenue for the All Blacks team, that kind of basically gets the entitlement to the revenue of the All Blacks team. And this company was basically sold to Silver Lake. So that's kind of like how the deal had to be done. They can't just sell the All Blacks or the New Zealand Rugby as a whole, because obviously there's a lot of debt and stuff that Silver Lake are not stupid enough to undertake. So they basically say, hey, we just want the revenue portion of your business because that's what makes sense to us. That's what we're interested in. New Zealand Rugby, obliged, basically created a sub company that is basically has the rights to the revenue, and then and that sub company was sold. And basically in that sub company they also had to put new like board members in, and one of the board members they put in is Sir Richie McCaw has been named as one of the board members alongside essentially the current top dogs in New Zealand rugby. Mark Robinson, we just talked about him, the CEO, chairman Stuart Mitchell, and board member Bailey Mackay. Is it Mackey? Bailey Mackey, whatever. So Richie McCaw was initially against the deal, basically, and he's kind of like been brought in as the representative of the Players Association on the board for this entity. Really interesting stuff. How they managed to convince him. I do feel like, I'm not sure, but I do feel like his role in this is more of a bit of a gimmick. I don't think he probably don't have much decision making. I'm not sure. Let me know your thoughts on this. But yeah, essentially he's on the board for the what do they call this? What do they call it? Anyway, he's basically on the board of the new company that's being created to be sold to Silver Lake, essentially. And also, it's really interesting to see as well the money that basically the Silver Lake deal would have given New Zealand rugby 200 million New Zealand dollars for 5 to 8% of ownership to the All Blacks. So with the 20 million New Zealand dollars, 37 million has already been decided to be spent right away. Yeah. And this is basically just giving money to their clubs. So like $1 million to each of the New Zealand top level provinces, $500,000 to low tier provinces each, and then $2 million to the Maori All Blacks, and $7.5 million to clubs, and $5 million to the Players Association. Yeah, so all that money is already gone. A huge chunk of that money is already gone. Let me know your thoughts of how they are managing this. I feel like that's probably not the right way to go, to spend all that money already right after you get paid. It's hand out money to anyway. So Bernie Retallick, so the guy with who got injured with a broken cheek against Ireland. Andrew Porter was the culprit, so he is good to go again. He's ready to play. He's currently named as a non-playing member of the team, as a training partner essentially, but he is expecting to play in the NPC in New Zealand, the provincial team in New Zealand this weekend. So he's available to play there, and also the All Black squad has been announced. You can go have a look at that yourself, but we will look at the lineups when it's being announced later this week against Argentina. Also, Jack Goodhue had a bit of a run. He was injured he wasn't injured actually. He was injured for a while, and then returned to play for the Crusaders in the final, I think couple rounds for the Crusaders, including the final, which they won. And then he was never actually selected to play in the All Blacks since the Super Rugby season. And then he finally returned onto the field last weekend, essentially, or over the weekend, and play for the play for Northland against Wellington. And essentially, he was just not feeling right. As a result, they had another look at him. Apparently, he needs knee surgery again, despite not technically being injured. He just has like a knee. His old knee injury just wasn't recovering correctly, so he's gonna go back under the knife to fix that knee again. So this is gonna be another long period before Jack Goodhue could return for that All Blacks return. Also, Joe Plumtree, a lot of you guys talked about him in the comment section. that he did a great job in South Africa and was welcome back to go to South Africa, a lot of you guys were saying. But he's actually found a job immediately with the Manawatu team in the NPC in New Zealand. He kind of contacted the team after being dropped from the All Blacks. And he was picked up by the club as a coach going forward. So that's the future for him. And finally, so let's moving on to the Springboks. So Springboks is currently in Australia, ready to play the Banana Peels. And so the first game is going to be played in Adelaide. They had a bit of a travel delay, which probably made things a little bit awkward with the training schedule. But overall, the Springboks has arrived in Australia. And not too much problems since arriving. So some of the newspaper actually look at the record for the Springboks against the Banana Peels in Australia. It seems that the Springbok has a pretty poor record against Australia, especially in Australia. So, so the total record, they've played 41 times, only won 12 times, so it's a 30% win rate against Australia, with the biggest margin of 26 points in 2013 in Brisbane. So that's the biggest win. And so some of the interesting stats here as well that they looked at. In the last 10 years, the Springboks has only won one game in Australia. That was the blowout in Brisbane in 2013. And in the last 20 years, the Springboks has only won 3 tests in Australia. And 2 of them are in Perth. Yeah. We know that a lot of South Africans do live in Perth. So maybe a bit of a home ground advantage for the Springbok team in Perth. But yeah, Perth is the only place that the Springboks has found some success in the last 20 years. And there was one draw in Perth as well. So, the win rate there for the Springboks is quite high if you take that into consideration as well. So, yeah, it's going to be quite interesting to see whether or not the Springboks going to slip again against the Wallabies coming up this weekend. So obviously the selection has been announced. Let's take a quick look at this team from the Springbok side. So a pretty interesting selection once again. So Ox Nche comes in, Lucia Pro for the Springboks. Joseph Dweba once again gets the number 2 jersey. So this article actually talks about how poorly Dweba has been performing for the Springboks. So he was basically taken off the field in the first half, like 25 minutes in. And we think how long was it? 25 minutes or something when he was on the field. He lost 4 lineouts. 4 lineouts he lost, 1 carry and 1 tackle. So really, really poor. When Malcolm Marx took over, he was much more better. 11 tackles, 9 successful lineouts and 1 turnover. So yeah, Dweba gets listed again ahead of Malcolm Marx on that number 2 jersey. Franz Malherbe gets number 3. Eben Smith number 4 as pretty standard. Lou Diega gets number 5 jersey again for the Springboks. Number 6, the captain Sia Khaleesi. Number 7, Peterson du Toit. And number 8, another contentious selection once again. Dwayne the Rock Vermeulen gets selected again for the number 8 jersey. His performance last week was pretty poor as well. Not last week, 2 weeks ago was pretty poor as well against the All Blacks. He was pulled off early in the first half as well. So interesting to just not see him, what's his name, take over. Jasper Wiese, who replaced him and did a much better job to replace him. In fact, last week, 2 weeks ago, I thought that was probably the last time we're going to see Vermeulen, considering how bad that was. And this year, I thought he might be done. But he gets another shot at number 8 jersey against the Wallabies this weekend. Another return for the Springboks as well. Faf de Klerk gets another start at number 9. So we really haven't seen Faf a lot this year. So far, his performance, I think he had one game where he started against Wales, which many consider was a bit poor. So I was surprised as well to not just see Jaden Hendricks starting ahead of him as a permanent fixture now for the Springboks. So another chance for Faf de Klerk to redeem himself as well. and to see what he can do for the Springboks. At number 10, 100 Pollard has probably got that number 10 jersey locked up for the Springboks and has been really, really solid. Big improvements for him and his kicking as well. His goal kicking is like close to 100% so far this season, whereas last year his kicking was like 50%. So huge improvement from his goal kicking as well. So yeah, 100 Pollard number 10. Makazono Apimbi number 11. Damien Dialendi at number 12. Lukamu the best winger for the Springboks, gets number 13 jersey as usual. Warwick Gelant gets number 14, replacing Jesse Krill, who has HIA. And then number 15, the greatest player in the history of the Springboks, Damian Valemsa, gets that number 15 jersey. On the bench, the Springboks is once again opting for the... actually, the Springboks is not opting for the bomb squad this week against the Wallabies. So really interesting stuff. Maybe they feel like the forward pack is already strong enough to beat the Wallabies, because we know how important that forward dominance is to the Springboks. So they have Malcolm Marks, Stephen Kittoff, Vincent Koch, the rock solid reserves coming off the bench. And then they have Franco Mostert comes in at number 19, another stable for that bench, the bench forward pack. And then Huaga Smith gets number 20 jersey, and we don't see Jasper Visa here at number 21. Instead, we'll get the Jaden Hendrickson, the reserve number 9, gets in number 21 jersey. Elton Yangshis returns to the reserve for the Springboks at the number 22. I don't think he's that bad, to be honest. A lot of people felt like that first test match should have been the end of his career, but I do feel like maybe he was, like I said, he has some personal issues with like the law, where he got like arrested for breaking something on the airplane. A lot of you guys probably don't know, breaking something on the aircraft is like a huge issue. It's like a huge felony. You could go to jail for like years for that, because it's considered like, close to terrorism sort of thing. Like, it's really, really bad to break something on the airplane. So we don't know what he was. So he was probably facing like jail time before the charges were dropped. So I wouldn't imagine that he was under a lot of pressure before the match. So that was in my opinion, that's probably led largely to his poor performance in that first test against Wales. But I feel like he's going to be much better this time after some time off. After spending some more time training and preparing. I feel like he's going to be okay this time coming off the bench. And finally, Francois Steyn makes his debut in 2022 for the Springboks. Gets number 23 jersey. Once again, I do feel like the third test match, the Springboks didn't have the leadership to close out the game against the All Blacks. Unlike the All Blacks, who had the mental capacity and leadership to finish the game strong, Springboks really didn't have that in the second test against the All Blacks. And I was watching the game thinking to myself, if Francois Steyn was on the bench instead of Villaroo, nothing against Villaroo, by the way, I thought he would have brought something different that would have probably helped the Springboks pushed over that hump and overcome the All Blacks in that second test. As we saw him do that in 2021 against the All Blacks in that 101st test match, he came off the bench and immediately made an impact. And I thought that was something that the Springboks is missing. Really good to see him coming back this year for the Springboks once again. We should see how he goes against the Wallabies. That's the Springbok team for the weekend. So we had a look at the stats already. And the Ninamba was a bit awkward when it comes to answering the question about why Dweba was selected. We talked about this last week. There could be something to do with the quota. That needs to fulfill that quota. Otherwise, they're not 50% non-white players on the field. Otherwise, the Springbok Rugby are not going to get government funding anymore. So could be that part of the politics. And basically, another bit of an awkward answer, calling it a technical issue. Ninamba for selecting Dweba in the starting number 2 jersey. He also tried to like talk around it a little bit to make it not so obvious. But yeah, it's I think a lot of, especially if you're South African, you will understand that this decision was probably made because of the quota. So obviously Cheslin Kobe currently injured with a jaw injury. Apparently there was some news leaked this week as well that he was offered a deal to play for the Stormers for some pretty big coins, 3.2 million euros for which is 55 million rand to play a 5 years contract for the Stormers, and he was and this also included a job for his wife, and this was turned down by Cheslin Kobe, citing there was some other report, but apparently he thought there was some security issues in South Africa for him that he didn't want to get he didn't want to expose his family to, and also the deal also allowed him to stay in France to January 2023, which would allow him to qualify for French citizenship as well. But yeah, Kobe declined the deal. Basically, he had a bit of a history growing up, getting pretty close to getting involved in like I guess gangster crime, that sort of things. But he was able to get out of that. So for him, apparently one of the issues is that he didn't want to get back into that proximity of life, and yeah, he didn't want to be back. But didn't want to be back in Cape Town. But there's also some report that he will be returning to South Africa after the Rugby World Cup in 2023 to the Sharks, because apparently the speculation is that his current management team is the Rock Nation. I think they also manage Ardie Savea as well, but don't quote me on. I'm pretty sure, yeah, maybe. But anyway, so he essentially the Rock Nation has a partnership with the Sharks. So there's some speculations that they're just trying to set him up with the Sharks because his agency that manages his career has an agreement with the Sharks. So yeah, that's the way it is. Also, the URC have some pretty big numbers last year after including the Springboks team, and yeah, some pretty extraordinary view numbers from last year's URC turnouts. So apparently the final in the URC saw 1.25 million viewers between the Stormers and the Bulls. So this is quite huge. I'm pretty sure in Australia, like the NRL Grand Final gets about 1.2 million. And then the AFL gets a little bit more, maybe like 1.4 million. So that's like the top. That's like the biggest sporting views in Australia, essentially. And in terms of finals, anyway, I don't know how much State of Origin gets, probably more than that. But in terms of like finals, grand finals, that's the numbers that you get. So 1.25 million is huge improvement for the URC for a rugby match. That's something that Super Rugby I don't think was able to achieve. Even when the South Africans were part of the competition. Anyway, let's move on to the Wallabies. So, yeah, Wallabies has recalled Bernard Foley into the fold for the upcoming series against the Springboks. The news is apparently saying that he's not going to be ready for the first test. So we'll have to see if he gets announced in the team later this week. But apparently he might be, and he will be ready for the second test. So, if he has worked last year by bringing back Quaid, I guess just play the same card twice and expect history to repeat itself. And bringing back Bernard Foley is pretty big for the Wallabies as well. So Foley is currently in camp with Wallabies, and he kind of apparently. So the story goes that apparently last year the Wallabies already wanted to bring him back into the fold. But he was not feeling it. Essentially, he didn't feel like it was the right moment for him to return for his personal issues or whatnot. So last year when the Wallabies played France, he'd said no. But this year, when Dave Rennie approached him again, he was pretty eager to jump on board. So maybe he basically said he saw the success with Quade Cooper with the Wallabies. He kind of felt that itch again, wanted to prove that he still got it as well for the Wallabies, and yeah, decided to return and to also bring that leadership role for the upcoming generation of youngest players as well. So Bernard Foley, we should see how he goes. And just like Quade Cooper, His goal kicking was not that good before he left for Japan. Maybe he's improved on it. We'll have to wait and see how he performs. So obviously the Wallabies losing to the Pumas 2 weeks ago was probably one of the most embarrassing moments in the history of the Wallabies. And one of the assistant coach, Matt Taylor, has stepped away. He is defense coach, so Wallabies defense was pretty awful. So yeah, he gets steps away from the Wallabies, and that is that. So the Wallabies has confirmed the squad for the Springboks coming up. Like I said, the biggest name we already talked about is the return of Bernard Foley, and also the dropping of James O'Connor. James O'Connor is not in the team, and yeah, we shall see if. And also, what is that? Noah Lolesio is back as well, so maybe Lolesio will start in the first test, and then Bernard Foley in the second. But I mean, if you're gonna start Noah Lolesio in the first test, just have him play both tests. Like, come on. A lot of people. I feel like his performance stepping in against Quade was pretty good. I don't know why they try to bring Quade back in for Argentina when Lolesio did quite well against England. I thought, I mean, not much better than last year anyway. Why did you just keep him for the Argentina test? I don't know, but it is. I'm a bit baffled by this. I feel like you should just keep going with Lolesio at this stage because he is a young talent and a much bigger future ahead of him than Quade and Bernard Foley, to be really frank. But it is one of those things where the coach, Dave Rooney, his contract is due as well in 2023. So he's trying to get us better results as he possibly can with the limited time that is given to him. So he doesn't really have that much interest to build somebody up for 2027 when he's not going to even keep the job potentially. So I can see what he's going at to try to just get the best out of the players today, instead of trying to build something towards the future, which is not really good for the long-term success of the Wallabies. But I can understand the way he's thinking. So we just talked about this. The coaching stuff has been changed. And next up, Fijian and Jura essentially is going to have, it's been confirmed that they're going to have more home tests in the 2023 season. It could be the last and final season for Super Rugby, as we talked about last week. Australia CEO, Rugby Australia CEO, has talked about pulling out of Super Rugby after the deal is finished in 2023. So this could be Fiji and Jura's last season. Who knows? But essentially, the CEO from the Fiji and Jura had to come out, immediately temper the expectations after giving more games next year for home games for Fiji and Juras. He basically has come out and said, hey guys, there's still a new team, don't get too excited. Essentially what he had to come out and say. So there was some stuff that came out of Europe. So apparently there's a club, the Worcester Warriors. Apparently they are potentially going to go bankrupt for not paying $6 million in taxes. So they have a overdue tax bill of $6 million, and as a result, they're not going to be able to afford that, and they are currently looking at going bankrupt. So yeah, make sure you pay your taxes. And that is it, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'm really tired. I haven't been able to sleep properly, so I'm gonna go to bed. And yeah, like, comment, and subscribe. I do appreciate it. This video will come out a little bit later than usual because I'm gonna go to bed first, and then I'm gonna get up and edit everything. Thanks for watching anyway. I do appreciate it, and see you guys later this week for the previews. Thank you very much. Cheers.